Good morning and welcome back to the next episode in Brand Designs with myself, James Davey, and Nathan Lomax will join me in a second. But we're very pleased to kind of bring into the conversation today Mr. James Turton from the brand Naturepac. James, good morning. How are you?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. Very well.
Good. And Nathan, good to see you again.
Morning, James. How you guys doing?
Good. Nathan always seems to be the
Good.
person with the best questions. I tend to resign myself to how you doing with your wash. So it's always good to have Nathan on the call with us on Brand Design. So it's awesome. So James, as per usual, kicking off this session, it'd be great to know a little bit more about you, the brand Naturepac, and kind of what you guys do over there. That would be awesome.
Well, we are a family-run company. Naturepac was derived from another packaging company, Evolution Packaging, and we did primarily sort of traditional retail packaging. A few years back, we realised that we needed to change our ways to a more sustainable future. And that's where Naturepac came from. And the passion behind Naturepac is just to try and do the best we can with the technology we've got at the moment within the food packaging sector, mainly food to go situation. It's me, my wife, and my mother-in-law who sort of own and run the business, and then we've got a great team helping us to do that.
Because I think it is a bit of a misnomer in the wider world that actually how unrecyclable and unsustainable our current kind of packaging is, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's a very people like to make it as confusing as possible. I think there's a lot of greenwashing going on, and our passion, our main drive is just to simplify things as much as possible and create supply packaging which people can deal with at home or on the street, not have to use specialist equipment and that sort of thing. So it is difficult, and it's a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. This isn't what we're offering at the moment. Probably won't be the same technology and offerings that we have in 12 months' time, or even 6 months' time.
Yeah, that's interesting. From a business perspective, though, you were talking about the team. You pretty much drive the business yourself, don't you? Even though it's a family-run business, you pretty much lead and drive the team from as the sole director in many ways, operational director.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. I mean, yes, yeah. So I get a lot of feedback from my wife, shall I say? Feedback.
Excellent.
I think that's a good way of putting it. But yes, essentially, I've got a cracking team. The Richard general manager, he's on board and helps drive the business forward as well. And I'm very fortunate that the guys that we have working here are all 100% behind the business, behind the brand. They get it. They're just as enthusiastic about hitting targets and such like as I am, and that was one of the key things I tried to do when I sort of took over business, which was to be as transparent as possible. Everybody here knows what our profit is, what our profit margin is, what we need to do. And I think that's been key in getting everybody's buy-in, into driving the business forward. And everybody here is never shies away from doing extra hours if needed, and just, like I say, pushing the business forward. We are very much. I personally hate standing still. Hate the thought of standing still. So.
James, you touched upon a few core skills there that you've got as a leader. And actually, one thing I've loved about this series working with James D is that you start to see some common traits in leaders across the board, transparency being one of them, humility being another. What other skills do you believe you have that make you the perfect business owner for Naturepac?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough question. I'm passionate about moving the business forward. As long as we're doing the right thing about our offering and making sure that we're offering the customers the right thing. It's then I feel a lot of pressure to make sure that we keep moving the business forward and growing it so that it's secure for the guys who work here. I'm in a fortunate position where I'm sort of able to provide for my family and my wife's family as such. And, it's not just that, it's all the guys who work here, we're providing for their families as well. So they're, doing everything we can to I don't know, realize that and get it. It helps to then get the guys buy-in, and helps them be motivated to drive it forward. I just try and include everybody in decision making. We have weekly meetings, monthly meetings. Any big decisions, I run past everybody here, from Richard, general manager, to our sales team, to the warehouse team. No big decision is taken without their input.
I love that inclusive nature, but do you find you get that kind of too many cooks situation where actually you've got to five because you've asked too many, and actually you then struggle to make decisions quickly?
Sometimes we've been very fortunate that we do make decisions quickly and just get on with them. And I like that. I've been in businesses before where you make a decision and then it takes 6 months to actually then get that, realised as such. Whereas here we tend to, I come up with an idea, come up with a suggestion, which normally comes from other guys. To be honest, I always get there, or I'm constantly asking them as to what they feel that can be improved on within the business. So I take their ideas and then sort of run it past a few other guys, and as long as the general consensus is yes, let's do it, then it just gets done. Even, to be honest, even if the general consensus sometimes is no, let's not do it. If I really feel passionate about it, we'll crack on and do it anyway. And I'm lucky that once we make a decision, even if it wasn't fully agreed with, that everybody just gets on with it and is happy to push forward with it.
There is something really special about having those shared values and shared goals, aren't there? In terms of everyone knowing, and a horrible analogy, being on the same bus. I think that's, I've just ticked a box on bullshit bingo. I might have to edit that. But there is that bit about the shared values and goal piece that even down to the warehouse level, which I love, because ultimately everyone kind of feels as though they're in that kind of sustainable journey that you're on.
Yeah, every day I make a point of going down to the warehouse and saying how much stuff we've invoiced that they've sent out.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, to them, it's just they're just picking a box off a shelf, sticking a label on it, putting it out. Well, by going down and saying, this is how much we've invoiced today, and it's because you guys have sent it out, all of a sudden it's not just picking a box. It's, if they didn't do that, we wouldn't invoice anything.
Yeah.
And then the business wouldn't run. So, I make a point of including everybody in all the figures and the runnings of the business, so that they all understand they play a key part in what we do. And that's the benefit, I suppose, of being a small team. And as we grow, the difficulty is going to be to make sure that all those people have the same philosophy, and we keep that small business mentality, even though we're getting bigger.
James, you talked a little bit earlier around pressure, and I don't want to push too hard, but what do you do when the pressure gets too much? Because many owner founders can relate to that. It's incredibly stressful having mortgages to pay and mouths to feed, and sometimes the pressure can get a lot. What are your coping mechanisms to kind of bring yourself back to reality and to realize that it's going to be okay?
I'm very fortunate that my wife brings me back down to earth when it's needed and says, look, just chill out. We'll go, I'll take my son and we'll go and have a day out somewhere and just try and forget it. And if I pick up my phone too much to look at the Shopify figures or whatever for the day, then again, I get accused and told to put it away, which, you need. It's very easy to just think about the business 24/7. And I have struggled with that before. I have had I suppose business psychology training before. My wife used to, and will again compete at a reasonable high level with the horses. And so we had a sports psychologist when we were doing that, and she's also sort of business coach. So last year, particularly when the pandemic first kicked off, I had a few sessions with her and found that very, very helpful, just to put things sort of put things into perspective, but then also generate a plan, you know, of how we need to tackle whatever it is that we need to tackle. And it's something which I've taken throughout the last sort of 18 months, 2 years and it's worked well. We've got a clear plan of what we want to do, clear targets of how to get there. So yeah.
And how do you plan, James, in terms of how far ahead do you look?
So we have it's a 4-year goal now. Last year was a 5-year goal of this is where we want to get to. This is what we want to reach. And these are the stages that we need. I look at the headline title of 5 years' time. I benchmarked against our competitors and said, look, I truly believe that we can achieve this. And then broke it down into, okay, this is what we need to do per year. And then for sort of last year and this year, almost breaking that down to a daily, right, this is what we need to do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Small steps that don't feel as though, because when you look at the big target, you think, how the heck are we going to achieve that? Whereas if you break it down to the smaller steps, it's like, okay, actually, this is achievable. This is more than achievable. We can do this. And this is what we need to do in order to get there.
It's like sorry, Nathan, go on.
I was just going to say, I'm curious about the outsource versus in-house model that you guys operate. How do you know as an owner-founder when to try and recruit for something versus when to send it to an agency to fulfill a task?
So that, to us, that's been an almost organic thing. So, one respect was the marketing. I was doing it in-house, but then didn't have enough time. We then got somebody. So I was doing it myself. Then we hired somebody to do it full time, and they sort of showed us what is achievable when you put more time and effort into say the marketing, into one specific thing. And then they left, and what I wanted to do was to have. We needed more skills, but more skills than we could afford to have by having 3, 4, 5 full-time people. So that's where we then took on outside agency and went, these guys can offer us the skills we need, but at a price which made sense to us and also enabled us to scale. So, and I think that's the biggest thing with what we've had some quite decent growth over the last sort of couple of years, and it's the scalability. Because what we need to do is need to be able to scale up without adding on all the costs straight away. So that's where outside agencies help, and also we're just taking on third-party fulfillment. So again, that enables us. You're only paying for what you're using. So then it enables us to scale up to a point where we can then decide whether we want to get a new building and do the fulfillment again ourselves, or whether we're happy to keep it with a third party type of thing.
It does aid in that scaling piece, because, but also there comes a challenge later down the line when you start wanting specific areas of growth. So PR is something that some brands bring in, brand management is something some brands bring in order to keep that really close, because ultimately that's where the business then starts to take on its own persona, doesn't it, at a certain point? From the scaling perspective, though, how have you found, because obviously scaling for you has been quite rapid through the pandemic, but actually what kind of core challenges has that scaling kind of produced?
For us, we're a wholesale company, so essentially we're a fulfillment company. We buy stuff in and sell it back out again. So in terms of scaling for us, has been physical space. So supply chains have been hit massively. So we're having to hold a lot more stock. So just physical space, we've run out of space, which is why we've had to have the third party fulfillment sort of side of things for the warehouse. It's then also just been we want to continue. We've had a taste of this growth, and we want to continue it. So when it comes to scaling up with outside agencies, it then you can add more bits on as and when you need it, and grow it from there instead, like I say, instead of having to have it all in, having all the cost up front in one go as such.
Yeah.
James, there's a conversation around entrepreneurs being born or made. What camp would you say you sit in, and why?
Oh, I don't know. Made, I think. I've always had I've always had an interest in business. Don't ask me why. I've got no idea. My mum was lucky enough not to need to work. My dad worked in banking all his life, pretty much. So there's no business running there. But when I was in sixth form, I ran me and my dad used to have off-road Jeeps that we used to modify up and off-road. And so I started up a business importing American Jeep parts and then selling them. And that did okay. And then I came in and worked my way up through the first packaging business we had, and now we and then moved into this. But I've always had an interest in business. I did business studies and accounting and IT at A level and such like. I've no idea why. I just enjoy it. I enjoy the biggest thing I enjoy about this is just looking at all the aspects of the business and trying to get them all moving up in the same direction. I'm not an expert in any field of the business, but that's where it's really important having then the other people within the business who are experts. You just go, my job and what I've said to the guys here is just to make sure that everybody is heading in the right direction, that we create an agile business that can chop and change wherever we need to, as long as we then hit the targets that we're looking to do.
I think the challenge around kind of the made versus born piece is that someone used to say to me that it's you play to your A's and B's and manage the consequences of your C's and D's. It's that bit you're talking about around finding people to backfill the gaps in where you enjoy or are strong, isn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm like, we've got a guy who's an expert in materials and packaging and such like. I've got a lady who is brilliant at accounts and also just making sure we're doing everything right. And then the warehouse guys are obviously excellent in the warehouse, and then I've got I did a bit of sales, but I'm not a salesman. I've always professed I'm not a salesman. So I've got Nick, who's a superb salesman, and then we've got sort of experts in customer service and such like. It's just I'm not an expert in a particular field. I just and that's what, like you say, that's where you need to make sure that you have the best people around you who can fill those holes. My job is just to make sure that everybody's heading in the right direction and motivated to keep going.
Some of the best entrepreneurs are truly just operators, aren't they? We spoke to a guy at Snaffling Pig, didn't we, Nathan, who has how many was it? I think it was 4 businesses on the go at once. He literally saw himself as an operator. He has not a model, but he literally just rolls his mind into a new business and goes, right, I just put the best people around me and I let them scale it with me going chucking a grenade in every now and again, going, what if we do this, or how do we do that? It's kind of, he said his team are what makes his business.
Yeah, with that, and it's interesting. In fact, just yesterday I was listening to another podcast with Ben Francis on it from Gymshark, and he was talking about one of his fears was that he didn't want to be known as just a founder. So there was a point where he had to move. He was asked not to be CEO, and now he's actually just been asked to be CEO again. Yeah. But he went away and trained and spent 2 years, trying to train to become a brilliant CEO. And he learned. He said he learned from the people that he brought into his business. He got the world's best sort of customer service, HR manager, people manager, and such like. And he said he was in a lucky position to be able to learn off those guys. And that's what I'm trying to do as well. I try to get as good a guys as we can get and learn from them.
Yeah.
James, hopefully we will get Ben Francis on the show in due course. But in terms of being driven by fear, a lot of entrepreneurs are driven by fear. I'm keen to see what drives you, what gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you want to come to work to make the organization a better place.
I just love it. It's difficult to say why. I love business. I love getting up in the morning and going, right, okay, how can we improve this? It's all about making small improvements every single day. If you make a small improvement every day, 12 months time, you'll look back and go, bloody hell, look how far we've come, which I have done. And, I spoke to James about it a couple of days ago where we, just how far we've come in the last 12 months is huge. And it's just that constant improvement. Me and my wife, we just can't sit still. Before we were running this business, like I say, my wife was competing. And again, it's all about training and learning from the best people you can do. That's one thing I have found tricky is trying to find out where the best place is to go to learn new skills, new techniques, new strategies, that sort of thing. And I found things like what you're doing here and other podcasts and such like to be extremely helpful in that situation.
From the pressure piece, is there a point in which you shelter your team from the pressure? Is that something you try and do, or do you find that leaking out into the team, and how does that kind of impact them?
No, most of the team, no, I keep it sheltered. I do talk about I don't know. It's difficult. I do talk about the pressure. I don't talk about it as much as perhaps I feel it. I'm very fortunate, like I say, in that I've got Richard, who's my sort of right-hand man, general manager here at the moment. I share a lot more with him in terms of pressure. But it comes down to that transparency again. So, they do know if I get under pressure and such like, but probably not to the full extent of it as such.
Because it's a fine line, isn't it? It's trying to find the line between giving enough information to keep them motivated and feel as though they're involved, but almost not giving too much away, because it can be very easy for a member of the team in a key position to start feeling worried about, well, actually the profit numbers are not quite as big as they were last month. Oh my God, does that mean my job's at risk? It's a real fine line. Yeah,
it is. I mean, I talk about the minimum we need to do in order to break even each month and all that sort of thing. So, and I tell them the turnover figures. So they do in that respect. They do know, what we need to do. And when I talk to them about growth and such, like I said, look, we need to grow to the next stage without adding on more cost. So, yes, which means that you're going to have to work a bit harder, probably, until we then get to the next level where we can then start to bring in more either, third parties or bring in more staff to then take the pressure off before we can then move up to the next stage. It's not, we can't just add staff on now before the growth is there. And, again, that's a fine line, a balancing act of how long we can push ourselves before we then need to go, okay, now we need to take some pressure off, we'll get some more people in, outsource, whatever it is, to then, release the pressure valve, so then we can start again and move up to the next step.
It's like steps, isn't it? You're literally just climbing a set of steps, and the jump up to the next steps as a 2-year-old can be quite daunting, but as you kind of develop, it's like being a toddler.
Indeed.
James, I've got a question around awareness and education around sustainable packaging, because actually anything sustainable at the moment, there's a huge amount of ignorance in the marketplace at the moment, and the likes of David Attenborough, etc., and Greta Thunberg doing masses to kind of improve that awareness. But still, there's a lot of people that would just go for a non-sustainable product due to ease or due to cost. What else needs to be done as a country or society to really embrace sustainability going forwards?
We need to make it easier. It's straightforward. It's just we need to make it easier for the general public and businesses to know what the right thing to do is, and then to dispose of it correctly. So we have been doing compostable packaging, industrially compostable packaging for quite a while now, and it has its pros and cons, like most things. In terms of pros, most of it is made from renewable resources. However, it is, and we're fully admit it, it is quite difficult to dispose of correctly. The infrastructure just isn't there yet. So we thought that the government were going to be investing more in commercially compostable facilities than they have done, and it has been the case. So we are changing tack a little bit. We do still where we feel the best option is still commercially compostable packaging. That is what we've done. That's what we still have. However, we are developing home compostable packaging, and then also recyclable packaging, but not just recyclable packaging. Where, I mean, technically most things can be recycled, however they don't get recycled. What we're concentrating on is making sure that the recycled packaging that we make available can be recycled at home, can truly be recycled in 90% of the UK. Put it in your recycling bin at home, it is going to get recycled. So that's things like PET, things like paper, card, that sort of thing. And then we're also trying to go one step further, where we're then making that packaging item out of post-consumer recycled material. So again, there's sort of two different types of recycled material. There's post-manufacturer, which means it's factory waste, which then gets recycled, or post-consumer, which means that it's been out in the environment, being collected, and then being recycled. So, and by doing that, by increasing demand in simple recyclable materials, the waste management companies are much more likely to want to collect that, because you're going to be increasing the value on it, because you're increasing the demand, and that's where it needs to become. Is things need to be clearly labelled and clear, and not just this can be recycled. It needs to be this can be recycled at home within the UK, and if it can't be recycled, it needs to be, or if it's unlikely to be recycled, it needs to be stated that as well, I think. So then it makes it so much clearer for the general public to go, okay, I've got this packaging item, the label on it says, I can recycle this at home, boom, fine, job done, put it in the recycling bin at home, or it goes into one of the general recycling bins, out on the street. By having so many different packaging materials out there, it just makes it too confusing, and the labelling is too confusing.
I mean, you look at the sugar tax now that's come out in terms of trying to deter people from buying chocolate or buying sweets, etc. Do you think that will come into fruition in the packaging world in some time, that essentially 10 years from now, actually, it's not a premium, more expensive product, it's a cheaper product because those that aren't sustainable have got a tax on?
Yeah, it's already coming in. So there's a EU directive that is taxing certain polythenes and such like higher than other polythenes. We understand that the UK government are going to be doing the same thing, essentially. So yeah, there are already plans, which is great, and it's what the industry needs. As long as then that taxation that has been collected then is put back into recycling facilities and developing the waste management systems, then all makes sense. And it's also just making sure that the right sort of polythenes or materials and such like are being taxed correctly, and that materials like rPET are encouraged. So rPET is recycled PET, very, very easily recyclable, because we also need to balance it with the fact that you do still need packaging to reduce food waste, to reduce to increase the longevity of food and such like. Because what you don't want to do is just say, okay, we'll get rid of all plastic, and then your food waste increases. But also, if you go to move all packaging to paper, where are you going to get all the trees from? We've already seen a massive shortage in cardboard and paper and such like, mainly because Amazon have bought up a whole host of boxes that so they've taken all the slack that was in the system, and transporting paper and such like costs more and is heavier, and so can increase the carbon footprint. if you move everything from polythene to paper, it isn't a simple, this is good, this is bad. You have to look at the full picture, the full carbon footprint of the material and go, okay, we need to make sure that it comes from the right sources, is used correctly, used as many times as possible, and then disposed of correctly. And it's not just as simple as polythene's bad, paper's good. It just doesn't work like that.
And I think you even look at the piece we were talking about very recently. I did not realise that for one of the high street coffee chains, that the only place you can truly recycle all of their cups is if you put it into a bin within that coffee shop itself.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you put it in a recycling bin in the high street, which, let's be honest, I would imagine 80 or 90% of them go because they're takeaway cups. It's kind of, if you drink in the coffee shop, you're drinking out of a China mug or something like that. So it does defeat the object a bit, and I think there's a little bit of consumer knowledge that has no idea about that. They believe they walk into a coffee store, one of the major high street ones, and goes, "Give me a latte," and oh great, a paper cup, I can throw that away. But actually, it's not recyclable at all.
No, well, it's very difficult to recycle. There's one factory within the UK that will recycle standard PE lined coffee cups, and so as a result, barely any get recycled at all. We're talking. I think the last figures I was looking at was just, less than 1% of all coffee cups in the UK get recycled, and that's just it's because of the liner, the way the liner is attached to the paper on the inside. It's a very energy intensive process to do, and because of the way the liner was attached to the paper, you don't get a decent paper recovery from the recycling process. So we're developing that. There are now out there cups which have special liners on them, which means that they can then go through the normal paper recycling facilities. The liner comes off so much easier. It comes off in the same sort of process as the when the ink that gets removed from the paper, and the paper and the fibre recovery from that paper, is very high quality and large volume compared to what you get from PE liners. So, but especially as paper cups, because they're food grade, the inner sleeve anyway certainly is normally made from virgin paper. So it's very high quality paper anyway.
Yeah.
And so then the fibre recovery from that is great, which then means you can then reuse that paper later on down the line for other applications.
James, I'm curious in terms of individual mindset. It seems as a society today, we seem to have a challenge around responsibility and accountability. And if you just look at the Euros recently and all the aftermath of that and people kind of hiding social media accounts and whatever else, how do we as a general population incentivize everyone to take accountability and responsibility for their own recycling, as opposed to thinking, oh, someone else will do it, I don't have to do it, or it doesn't matter about the third or fourth generation because that's not going to affect me today? How do we adjust that whole mindset as a nation to take responsibility for each of our actions when it comes to sustainability, as opposed to pushing the problem down the chain?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of the companies and such like that are generating the waste, and just like I said before, making it as easy as possible for people to do the correct thing. I think generally people, if it's difficult, people won't do it. So if it's easy, then people are much more likely to do it. And then actually, I think we're lucky in that I think the tide is turning. I think when you start to look at the younger generation, actually, a lot of them are, because of growing up, recently with David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg and such like, and there is a lot more emphasis on doing the right thing sustainably, and I don't know. I mean, all it takes is sometimes just a walk down the road and see how much litter there is about to go, actually, this isn't right, and trying to change people's mindsets to that. I think, like I said, I think the young generation are actually doing a pretty good job of it. That's where a lot of the motivation for change has come from, especially in our experience dealing with new business owners who have started up new coffee shops and such like. They're very, very much sustainably minded. And I think it's just trying to make it so that littering is as bad as, smoking in the car with children. Just that is, it's just frowned upon. It's not, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it just takes, an extra person each day just to go, I shouldn't be littering. I shouldn't be chucking this on the floor. I should be putting it in the bin. And then seeing someone who does that, just saying, look, you don't even have to necessarily say to me. You can go behind them and pick it up and put it in the bin. It's just doing the right thing, and I think that should hopefully feed down through people's mentality. If they're seen to be doing, if they're in the minority and doing the wrong thing, then hopefully, by going on their conscience, that hopefully they do the right thing. But I think in terms of industry, I think it's just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to do.
The one thing we've kind of, it's very clear today, is that you're incredibly passionate about your values and your direction and where you're taking the business. But without this sounding like a marriage counselling session, how do you keep that passion alive within you and the business? Because some of the founders do go through this cycle of, well, actually, I'm starting to fall out of love with what I'm doing. How do you kind of keep that passion alive?
I find the motivation, I suppose, from non-places. I'm terrified of standing still. I'm terrified of, I suppose it's almost, is it imposter syndrome? Something to wake up one day and go, and actually the business has failed, and it's my fault. And it's not. It's am I actually being able to make the growth that we've done? Is it down to me or not? And I think having that, I suppose it's almost a fear of if I stand still or go backwards, then I'm going to be proved that actually I can't do my job. I think that's where that perhaps comes from. And like I say, absolutely terrified of standing still, and that motivates me a lot. Also, like I say, I'm really lucky to have my wife behind me who helps to motivate me, to then sort of motivate the team. It comes from just being there and supporting, having good ideas. It also comes from the long shopping list that she has that need to keep working in order to pay for it. So, but no, it does. It comes. I don't know. It's just. I just have it at the moment. I just have that motivation at the moment, and I just hope that it doesn't go. And I think constantly setting those goals and going, okay, right, this is what we want to do this year. This is what we want to do next year. This is what we want to do in 4 years' time, and then having the team to back me up. There's several guys in the team who go, right, okay, what are the goals? What are we going to achieve? And are those goals enough? Should we be pushing ourselves a bit more? Should we be pushing ourselves a bit harder? So having backup of motivation from the guys around me as well, going, come on, let's keep this pushing. That I think that's what does it. Having the right people behind you and around you.
James, one thing I love about talking to other owner founders and entrepreneurs is that same common underlying challenge of not being good enough. And I love the authenticity that you've shared with us today about that kind of drives you on and you're keen to continuously learn and everything else. In terms of learning and continuous improvement, you mentioned podcasts. Have you managed to find mentors or those that have been there, seen it, done it, that can perhaps help you on that journey? Because it's one thing having a wife in your corner and that's great, but sometimes your wife's direction may be led by something else, and actually having someone that's been there, seen it, done it might be better for you in the business. Have you got external help that can do that?
Yeah, again, I've tried to make contact with other business owners that I know, and just to go out and have lunch with them and just have a discussion about their business, about our business, and you get ideas from that. I've had one recently, and I've contacted someone else who we actually do sort of some business with, and I'm going to meet them in a week's or so time. I do find it difficult though to find more people to do that, to go and just have a chat with, an informal chat and just brainstorm and talk about their ideas and such like. I suppose particularly over the last sort of 18 months or so, that's been very difficult to do.
Things like Zoom and Google Meet, etc. In some ways, it should be much easier because you haven't got to travel. You've just got to jump online and share your thoughts. Is it a challenge with people being honest and vulnerable, or is it a challenge with people's time and priorities?
I think you always get obviously you always get a much better conversation. I think in person, you can read body language a lot more, and I think you can ask more in depth questions, or you get led down to asking more in depth questions in person because you understand a lot more how the person is feeling than obviously just if you look at their shoulders and face as such. And I suppose it has also been down to time because everybody's been in the same situation where, particularly business owners, where we've had to drastically change what we do, or just we had to react to market forces or what's going on. And to be honest, it's also finding people and then having the courage, I suppose, to contact those business owners and go, look, can you spare me a couple hours over some lunch and just have a chat with no agenda other than let's just talk about our businesses and see what comes of it. It's finding those sorts of people where to look for them, where to search for them essentially, and then like I say, having the courage to contact them and saying, look, do you mind having a chat?
There are a couple of groups that we've come across over the years that have been quite useful from that perspective. So there's the Enterprise Nation network can be very, very beneficial for small owner founders who are starting up and kind of getting into that scale. They've got lots of other people who have not necessarily been through the process yet, but are going through the same process. So that's quite nice to find other people of a similar size. It's when you get to some of the larger businesses where you then go to a B4M group, and it's like, well, actually, that could be like-minded owner founders. It's actually just a sales network. Do you get the right conversation? Do you get the right quality of time? You're right, it is quite difficult. The one thing we found from this Owner Founder series, though, is actually quite interestingly, Ted Bell from Freddy's Flowers was really open. He said, if a company in a similar space to us phones me up and wants some advice, I'll give it to them. Because he said, I would not expect, but I'd love for someone to be able to do the same to me if I ask the question. So we have found that most owner founders have said either when they've knocked on doors, the door hasn't actually been shut in their face at all, quite the opposite. And the other one is that they themselves, when they've got to a certain position, are actually very much more in the mindset that they would be happy to share the time. But you're right, it's one, finding the time, and two, picking up the courage to kind of knock on the door and not almost be afraid of that negative reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it's something that I need to get better at. Like I've said before, I want to learn, I want to get better, I want to be much better at the job that I'm doing at the moment. It's also getting better at setting time aside for your own education, because it's very, very easy to, being a owner founder or whatever, to just get wrapped up in the day-to-day running and the firefighting that goes on in a business. I have found I'm getting better at it, but I have found it very difficult just to step back and go, okay, what's the bigger picture? Where does the business need to improve? Where do I need to improve? And just taking a time to breathe and go, oh, okay, let's just pause a second. Let's do a bit of planning. Let's do a bit of education, and then let's fire up again.
You're definitely not the only one. I'm atrocious. My diary is managed by a HubSpot meeting link that I hand out to people and verbatim. It's kind of, I don't plan anything in my diary. I'm terrible.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's an important thing to do, I think.
It is, yeah.
Final question from me was just around, without giving away too much, where can we expect to see Naturepac going in the next 2, 3, 5 years? You touched a little bit about the 5-year plan. What of that can you share? What do I expect to see when I look at Naturepac in a few years? What's it going to look like?
We want to be, Naturepac wants to be the brand for sustainable packaging. At the moment we've got a competitor where they're almost like Hoover is to vacuum cleaner. When somebody says that they want this, that's what they talk about, even though they don't actually. It's vegware. They're the biggest brand in our industry. We want to become a vegware and bigger. That's what the goal is. But while we're doing that, we want to be educating as many people as we can, businesses, schools, into sustainable packaging. And like I say, yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal, is to become bigger and better than our competitors.
So I can safely say I can't really leave it on a better point, round it off. Watch out vegware. As a summation. But James, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to kind of be the people asking you questions today. And
thank you.
The education piece for me, let's keep on that journey of helping educate people in terms of how to make it easy and to take that right step. So thank you again. And Nathan, thank you as always. And we look forward to welcoming you all back onto the next episode of Brand Design.
One final thing, if you are interested in Naturepac, please go to nature, Nature, pac.co.uk. There's some fantastic products on there. And James, thanks again for your time. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. JD, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Speak to you all very soon.